a holy warrior, crusading knight, Knights of the Round Table, Arthurian style. Whatever your thoughts on Paladins, they are one of the most awkward and difficult topics in fantasy role-playing games. So why is that? It comes down to the alignment, that they have to be lawful good, and it comes down to this idea that many GMs have, that Paladins have to be extra squeaky clean compared to other lawful good characters so that they don't fall. And there are many GMs out there who try very hard to do just that to Paladins played in their game. Not to mention the fact that a lot of people take the Paladinic approach to lawful good too far. It's almost like you've got a party of mercenaries and ne'er-do-wells, regardless of their alignment, and they're not allowed to do anything bad or naughty because you're a paladin. You know what? You're wrong. I think the problem with Paladins comes from something that I've read about in the very early format of Dungeons and Dragons, in which it very heavily implies that Paladins must act in a perfectly lawful good manner or fall, lose their paladinic abilities. And this tends to get copied across in the character description from edition to edition, and people get hung up really tightly on it, that the paladin is somehow held to an even greater example than anybody else. And it's balderdash, it utterly is. Just because the character is lawful good, just because the paladin follows a code that says don't do naughty things, doesn't mean that they can't be played the same way as any other character. True, a lot of people like to play them where they're not going to kill enemies that have surrendered, and that's fine. That's having honour. That's something that I expect of a knightly figure. And my opinion on Paladins is that they are very much Arthurian knights. That's how I view them. They are the classical hero of medieval lore, rather than necessarily being champions of the faith, which they can just as much as a cleric can be. They can still drink. They can still frequent a brothel between adventures, providing it's legal. And let's be honest, those sort of things aren't illegal in most medieval or faux medieval settings. If needs be, they can break in somewhere, especially if they're doing something for the greater good. You know, they will follow the law, but ultimately they are just any other sort of character. And I, as a GM, try not to be overly harsh with them. I generally tend to trust players to play a paladin how they want to. You know, they know well enough to stick to a lawful good approach. So why do so many basically want to see these characters fail? Why do so many want to see them fall to the dark side? And honestly, I don't know. I do think some of it comes from the simple fact that no other class that I can think of has that sort of stipulation in its character description. Even druids, where it says about they lose their druidic abilities if they use metal weapons or wear metal armour, they don't necessarily lose what they are. They have to do an atonement spell and they're done. no one's going to turn around and say, well, you're not a druid just because you picked up a longsword to save your companion's life. But the moment a paladin puts his elbow through a window to unlock the kitchen door so that the rest of the party can get in and search the bad guy's mansion, suddenly he's no longer lawful good. And it's like, well, you're wrong. Because if you had a lawful good fighter or a lawful good wizard doing exactly the same thing, you wouldn't bat an eyelid. My sort of recommendation on this is to treat paladins like any other class. If they do something, or they say that they're going to do something that you think is awkward and could lead to something bad, just say so. I know sometimes players have this thing about, well, don't tell me what my character can and can't do, but paladins, because of how we view them in role-playing games, probably need this. I had a player many years ago, 3rd edition, I've mentioned him before, bit of a power gamer, excellent rules lawyer, who played a paladin in a Dragonlance game that I ran. And he had got himself, I can't think what they call it now, brilliant energy weapon, or he'd used his paladinic abilities to create it. And they had found the tomb of an ancient priest of his faith, which they were searching for to recover something within the tomb. And he just wanted, without any sort of element of role playing or anything like that, to just turn his weapon into basically a two-dimensional and slice the lid off and just take the artifact, the item. And I thought, fine, but you probably want to maybe do something in character first. So I said, are you sure you want to do that? And he thought about it for a minute and looked at me and went, yeah. Like, are you sure you want to do that? Yeah. So I did do exactly what I've sort of said about don't do. And I said, right, you slice the lid of the tomb up. However, you feel that your god's displeasure has been brought down upon you. And so basically, just for the intent of, okay, you can get what you want, you can do what you want, you're going to lose your paladinic things until you get an atonement. Because this was a favoured legendary high priest of your faith, and you didn't even stop to maybe even sort of like just put your hand on the tomb lid and ask the gods for forgiveness or pray to the deceased spirit, at which point I wouldn't have had an issue. You know, that little bit of role playing to go along with it. And the player went off the wall about it. Ultimately, he ended up becoming a villain later on, and I let him play the villain when he came back as an anti-paladin, which was quite cool in itself. Although he then got annoyed that the party killed his anti-paladin. It's like, well, you are the villain. But there are little elements like that. That is an example of where the GM can kind of, you know, there is nothing wrong with just doing the "are you sure?" Because when the GM says that to you, you should really stop and go, "I'm being told something," and think about it. You know, and the slightest little bit of role play added on would have been fine. Just because paladins have that clause in there about doing things and falling doesn't mean you have to use it. Just let the player play them as a character. I used the example earlier about a lawful good wizard or fighter breaking into somebody's house if they're the villain and what have you. Well, what's the problem? At the end of the day, lawful good is an alignment. It's how your character purports themselves. You know, they're doing good. That lawful element can just simply mean they have a code. Doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with the laws of society or whatever. Sure, they try their best to uphold them, but they have a personal code, which in the case of a paladin is something chivalric or what have you. I think paladins get a rough ride and they don't need it. So my recommendation is let the player play the paladin, let them play their character, and only sort of step in when you feel that they are either pushing something a little too far, or just a moment of role play would fix the issue, something that fits into the story. Don't be heavy-handed and treat them as something different just because they are a paladin. What do you think about that? I'd love to know your thoughts and comments. Pop them in the little text box below. Like the vid, subscribe, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the topic in the discussion box below. I know that this is only a short video and it's fairly just a train of verbal thought, but it's been on my mind for a long time talking about this. Even though there isn't an awful lot to put across, it's one of those topics that comes up a lot in role-playing games, especially D&D and Pathfinder. And I do think that people, GMs, overthink the paladin too much, and I think sometimes party members do as well. Your fellow players on the table should be grateful that they've got a sword swinging healer anti-evil guy on their party and not see them as some sort of babysitter. Anyway, thanks for listening. I know it's only a little short bit, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Take care and good gaming.